Go.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Lendvoy, and I'm an occupational therapist, and I'm here doing an ergonomic presentation today. We are going to go over how to set up your chair and your workstation so that you can be more comfortable. There is a document called Adjusting and Adapting Your Computer Workstation. It's an ergonomic checklist. There's a picture here of all the different things that what you can adjust. So each of them has a number. We're going to go through each number one at a time, and hopefully by the time we're done adjusting that, you can be a little more comfortable at your workstation. So the first one, and Crystal here is going to be my model. Your thighs should parallel to the floor. So when you look at somebody from the side, and I'll just stand up here, you're looking at your knees, your hips at about 90 degrees, almost the same height. Some people like to have their knees just a little bit lower than their hip height. So Crystal right now, it looks like her knees are way higher than her hips, so she's adjusting her chair on the right-hand side to bring her chair up so that her thighs are about parallel to the floor. The next point is your feet should lay flat on the floor, the footrest. In terms of that, most people, unless they're really quite short, have no troubles with doing that. If you don't quite touch the floor, obviously you can get a footrest. And I mentioned earlier to these folks that your shoe height does matter a little bit. So if you're a woman that varies between really flat shoes and high heels, sometimes you'll have to adjust your chair height to accommodate that, so that you're not feeling your knees are way up high. The third point, the back of the knee should be clear of the front edge of the seat. What I often recommend to people is that if you can get about 2 to 3 fingers between the back of your knees and then the front edge of the chair, that is what you're looking for. If it's too close, you can get some compression on the backs of your knees. If you've got really long thighs and you haven't adjusted your chair out, you get more pressure through your hips and not enough support along your thighs. So there is an adjustment on the left side of the chair over here that you can change the seat depth. Sometimes that one's easier, you kind of just scooch it forward. Sometimes it's easier to do that one when you're out of the chair. So if you have troubles figuring that one out, and then you sit back in again and you kind of measure that, is that 2 to 3 fingers. So at 5'3", if I have my chair right now is all the way out, the chair is right against the back of my knees, and I have actually assessed people who have numbness in their feet because their chair was too long. And most chairs these days have the adjustment, but not all do. Number 4, your back should be well supported. So I'm sitting here not well supported, and I often will go into people's offices and they don't even know what the lumbar support in their chair is because they never use it. So what you're wanting to do is sit nice and close to the back of your chair. Most of us tend to kind of slide a little bit, and so we're sitting a little bit forward. And what you're looking at with that, most of us like to have a chair that goes up to at least our middle of our shoulder blades. And then in terms of the lumbar support, these boardroom chairs do not have any adjustability in the lumbar support, but most of the chairs in your building do have the ability to adjust both up and down as well as in and out. And so what you're doing with that one is most of us like to have that lumbar support in the middle of our curve. Some people like it a little bit lower, a little bit higher. In terms of the in and out, I tell people by all means change that throughout the day. If you're going to drive all the way to Calgary, which is about a 7-hour drive, if you have adjustable lumbar, most people I know put it in and out. So why wouldn't you do that on your office chair? There are some people who have a bigger lumbar curve and they like to have a bit more lumbar support. I'm just going to get something in my bag. I don't recommend the great big obus form kinds of, or the taller lumbar supports, because what they do is they push you away from the back of your chair, and now your shoulder blades aren't touching anymore, and you've just, that $500 or $600 chair no longer is working the way it's supposed to. But sometimes physios will provide things like this to their if you're going to physio. They compress quite a bit, but they still give you that extra lumbar support. So if you think you need more lumbar support, you're hopefully seeing a healthcare practitioner, and they might recommend something like this. It has a little strap on it so that you can put it on. It doesn't roll off every time you get out of the chair, unlike the cushion from your couch. The next one, forearms should be supported and your shoulders relaxed at all times. We were just talking about this in terms of how can you do this with your computer workstation. So these boardroom chairs don't adjust in height, yours do. What you're wanting to do is adjust them so that you don't feel like your shoulders are way up, or that you're kind of slouching down to get to them. And if you have the ability to bring them in, if you're a more petite person, you can. So go ahead pull yourself up. So if you had the ability to adjust your armrest,
So that would be too high.
the armrests themselves, are you feeling comfortable in terms of the shoulder and the elbow?
Not too bad. I feel
Not
like
too bad.
I'm kind of
So because you don't have a keyboard drawer, you
Mhm.
can't adjust your armrests are actually pretty good. If you had a keyboard drawer, you would have dropped it down to the same height as the armrest.
Mhm.
So because you don't have that, what you would do instead is you're going to raise your chair height so that the armrests are the exact same height as the desk, and you get yourself a footrest.
So yeah, that would be better.
So what I find for people most of the time is they can keep their left arm in the armrest while they're typing, the right arm in the armrest while they're mousing, and in terms of getting the right arm on the armrest while they're typing, your arm just slides off. And that's okay. If you're a little wider, you can stay on. The next point, elbow should be approximately the same height as the keyboard, so we kind of did both of those together. Wrist should be straight at all times and hands in line with your forearms. It's kind of impossible to be straight at all times. If you are petite or you've got wrist issues or you're wider, sometimes a different keyboard can make that a little easier. That's one of the reasons why they make those split keyboards that tent and move out a little bit. So if you're a little bit wider, it's a little bit more more natural position for your wrist. Monitor. We do not have a monitor, but this is going to be our monitor. What most people like to do, and I'm going to cover your face here for the camera,
yeah,
is that we want to draw, if we draw a line, if you look at from the side, you want to draw a line from your eyes to the top of the monitor, and you want to be looking just slightly down. One kind of thing that I've heard people say is if you can just peer up and see over the top of the monitor, it's probably a good height. The other thing in terms of distance is most of us like to be just beyond arm's length. The bigger the monitor, the farther away it can be. I know a lot of you also have two monitors. So there's sort of two things you can do with two monitors. You can either center them in front of the person's trunk if they're going back and forth between them quite a bit, which most people do. But if you're using one more like a copy holder, so if this one is like the main monitor, you can have the second one off to either side. So it kind of depends on how you end up using them. I find that at first, most people use the second monitor more like a copy holder, but then they gradually use them fairly equally and then they can put them together. If you are using two different sizes of monitors, you want to try to get them to about the same height, because like I know sometimes people often use their notebook computer as their second monitor. I've also seen people do one in a vertical and one in a horizontal orientation, and that's okay too. It depends what you're looking at. Some people like to look at their spreadsheets long rather than horizontal. And on the other side of the page on here, it's going through how to adjust your chair. For all of your chairs, if you know the name of your chair, you Google it. Often there is a YouTube video or at least a PDF about it, and I'm sure Crystal can help you find it.
yeah. It's also on Uconnect as well, and they are called Zody chairs.
Z-O-D-Y. Note 7, it talks about the size and position of the mouse. If you have really small hands or really big hands, you might need a different kind of mouse. There's also different mice in terms of, there's lots of different options if you have any kind of a healthcare condition. Most of us though can use a standard average everyday mouse. Some people prefer wireless, some people find that the cords you're always pulling on them, especially if you're using your mouse on your desktop rather than a keyboard tray. The other thing that I often tell people is play with your settings, your pointer settings on your mouse, especially if you're using more than one monitor. You think about how many miles you do in a day moving from that side of that monitor to that side of that monitor. If you make your pointer settings a little bit more precise, it means less miles. And I've had more than one person say, of all the things you told me, that was the thing that helped the most, changing the pointer settings. And that one floored me actually the first time I heard that. When I did it for my computer, I kind of swore at it for the first couple of days because instead of cutting and pasting 4 words, I'd cut and paste 6. And so until my brain got used to how precise it was, I was a little bit frustrated, but it took me about a week to get used to it. Note 8 is about lighting and glare. We just never want to have a light source directly behind our monitor, so if you have a window right behind your monitor, sometimes you actually have to close the blinds just right behind the monitor. Or more likely in a downtown building, I sometimes find that people get glare for like 15 minutes of the day, and they're doing this to go around that glare, and not a big deal if it's only 15 minutes. Work organization, note number 9, the biggest one I point out to people is get out of your chair more often. The recommendation is for every 30 minutes you sit, you get out of your chair for 30 seconds, do a little moving around, and sit back down. It also gets your eyes off the monitor and gets the little eye muscles a little bit of a break. The note 6 over here is about position of the, it says computer monitor. In fact, no, I'm looking more at hand position for the keyboard. One of the biggest things I see is people's keyboard drawers are not at the right height. So as we said earlier, what you're trying to do is get this nice line so that your keyboard and your armrest are the same height. So most of you have the ability to adjust your keyboard. So I always suggest if you have a keyboard tray, adjust your chair first and then adjust the keyboard tray to that same height. If you are working on a desktop, you're going to have to adjust to the desktop height. So do you guys have any questions or anything that you think I need to mention for the people that are going to be watching later?
I think you're covering it really well.
Okay, so that's it. So as we said, this document is on your intranet, so you can look it up if you need to try it later.